Welcome to another episode of us interviewing one of Desiree's friends.
Well, I definitely fit your vibe, so it's all good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we've been trying to make this happen for a long time now.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. I know
we're months of, we've back and forth scheduling, trying to figure stuff out.
Yeah.
But thank you for being here. We appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
So today we're joined by Katie, who is a psychotherapist and author. You do Reiki. What else? I know there was a lot on that.
Yes. I am a woman of many hats I wear. So to give you kind of like the gist, when I was in high school, I knew that I wanted to help people. I just had this like heart and drive to want to do something that's going to impact people's lives. So I knew right away I wanted to do something like that. But I also, when I was 15, was in the hospitality industry. You know, you go out and you find your first job. I was working at a fine dining restaurant, and I loved that aspect of hospitality, and we did weddings there. So I had these two passions, and I went to school for social work. So I got my bachelor's and my master's in social work. And then I went the trajectory to get my concentration in my master's in clinical. And then I got licensed. And so I did therapy. And then I'm still a therapist today. I have my own private practice called Strengthen the Soul. And then I simultaneously grew a wedding and event planning business. And each of those businesses are multifaceted, you know, with Strengthen the Soul. I was a psychotherapist, but then I also added Reiki in and a psychic medium, and I do tarot cards, intuitive services, spiritual guidance, energy healing. And as I grew and healed on my own journey, I realized, which we all know, that healing is not linear, and healing is of the mind, body, and soul. So with that, you know, I do somatic practices, community work, workshops. I wrote a book, you know, to help people on their trauma recovery journey. It's called Safety at the Roots, and it's a collection of information and tools. And so basically, if you're, you know, going to therapy or you're not ready to go to therapy, you have everything you need in that book with the mind, body, and the soul. So
that's a lot of different things.
A lot of things.
Yeah. How did you find it because like oftentimes people pick one or the other. They'll pick like being a therapist, or they'll pick kind of like the holistic route of like the Reiki and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What made you want to kind of combine both of those things?
I think it's definitely my own healing journey and just like my values. Obviously, there are times where I definitely struggle, especially like on social media, and how to show up in my authority as both, because, you know, as a licensed therapist, you focus a lot on the mind and the body, but, you know, spirituality is kind of like this new entity that kind of comes in the world we live in today, but like old-fashioned therapy, you're not talking about that kind of stuff. And so I want to show up and be very like mental health focused and very spiritual focused and science focused. But then, you know, it's hard to sometimes do both, but I had to feel confident in my ability to do both and realize this is me, and this is why people are drawn to me. And so oftentimes I would get people who were attracted to me and saying, I've tried traditional psychotherapy before. I wasn't really vibing with my therapist, and I really want to get to know you and learn more about your approach. And that also helped my confidence in doing both and realizing that I can do both. I love it. And my own spiritual and healing journey through grief and mental health and, you know, just growing as a woman, I realized like I love combining all of these different practices, and I've seen my life transform through all of these practices. And then in turn, I've helped many clients do the same with those practices.
Mm-hmm. All right. So we haven't really talked about on this podcast a lot of how trauma resonates in the body with anybody, because we haven't had the right person, and you're perfect for that.
Yeah.
So I'd like to just ask, like, how do you think that traditionally when you go through therapy and you're working through stuff and speaking through it verbally, that might help some people, but other people have some deep-rooted trauma that's in the body. How do you go about approaching that, and how do you see the similarities?
Absolutely. And that's where it's really important to trust yourself and have a really healthy relationship with yourself and gain self-awareness, which psychotherapy really helps with. You know, as you're talking and processing, you might gain that self-awareness with the right person, and then you can take it a step further with doing other healing practices like energy work and somatic work. And as things come up for you, then it's important to advocate for yourself and seek support. I think psychotherapy is amazing. Obviously, I am a therapist, and I believe in the work. And there are a lot of people out there who say, psychotherapy doesn't work. You have to do somatic work, and I see those posts and I'm like, that's not exactly true, but I understand where they're coming from, because working with the body is so important on your healing journey. And I don't think enough people understand that, although it is getting a lot of traction now. And what happens is when we're young, even from conception and when you're in the womb, you're taking on energy, you're taking on processing information through your own nervous system as it's building. When you're in your mother's womb, you're receiving information from your mother. And then when you're born up until probably around 7 years old, you're developing your subconscious mind. And your subconscious mind is designed to keep you alive. And so during that time, it's processing information and storing things. It's essentially the filter that everything goes through when, you are walking through your life. And we become programmed at that time. And when we're younger, let's just say you have childhood trauma per se, but you can even identify with this if you've had trauma later in your life. Our body is a receiver as well. It's our energy, it's our nervous system, it's our protector, and it holds everything that we have within ourselves. So as we're moving through life and we're perceiving things, sometimes it's hard for the mind to process information, especially if it's really difficult. And we're experiencing these really difficult emotions. So what happens, especially when we're young and we are mentally and cognitively not developed enough to process and understand what's happening, the body is processing it. And so you're feeling things, you're having emotions, you are experiencing some sort of stress response, and it'll get stored in the body. And oftentimes we don't even realize it. So then we're moving through life and we don't understand that the reactions that we have in our day-to-day current state is because maybe when we were 5, we stored that emotion and something felt really similar to us. Our brain has an alarm system, and basically if something feels very similar, or our brain is that filter that I was telling you guys about, something is going through that filter that is sends an alarm through your body, protect, we've gone through this before, we need to keep you safe, go into survival mode, essentially your trauma responses. The body will react as if it was something that happened in the past or something that is perceived as a threat to you in your body, essentially. And so if you're not working with your body actively to release what's been stored or even to reprogram so that you can navigate new experiences in a healthy way, then you're going to stay stuck in those trauma responses. So essentially, you really do have to have a healthy relationship with your mind and your body to heal holistically, because we are a whole person. And we are spiritual beings having a human experience. We're spirit first. We come in and we are in this body. So mind, body, soul connected together, you have to understand that to really deeply heal.
Nice. So for somebody who, a lot of the times, when you're going through something, you're very aware of it mentally within your brain.
Yeah.
But we may get used to the aches and pains or whatever that, how would that trauma, maybe an example of how would that show up for somebody who's just I have an ache in my foot, how does that how do you go about identifying that?
I can push it further. I have
Yeah.
There'll be times where somebody will say something to me and I feel this feeling right of tension in my body very, very quickly, and it'll put me to where I'm about to overreact in frustration, I guess. But I can I notice it's there and I'm what the hell is going on? And the more that I'm tuned into that feeling, the faster it goes by.
Oh yeah.
But like if I don't like notice it and be like it's just happening right now, then it sits with me and like I get frustrated for a very long time.
Oh, absolutely. We are so intelligent, we don't even realize it. Our body is so smart. And I always tell people like our body is designed to heal and our body is designed to keep us alive. So everything that you experience is like the body talking to you and communicating to you. So if you want to start helping yourself to gain self-awareness, to understand how to deeply heal with yourself instead of just relying externally on like books and podcasts or other people, professionals.
What are you trying to say about podcasts, bro?
Even though they are amazing, right? Like I have a podcast, and I love free resources are everything. What you guys are doing, to be able to build a community and make an impact on people's lives is incredible. People who show up on social media and give out free resources, information, incredible. It's a devotion to that community and this work and the lifestyle because listen, I got very burnt out by trying to do it all as well. It's a lot to show up and do it while also you're taking care of yourself, like we're healing too, and so we're showing up to help others while we're doing the work ourselves. It's a lot. So it's amazing, but obviously you are your own best healer. So, you can have the power to heal yourself and do the work. But gaining that self-awareness takes a lot of time and consistency. And a lot of people are programmed because they are in survival mode to ignore because, that is trying to survive. Like, oh, that pain in my body is getting in the way of me going to work or taking care of myself or my family. So I just have to push it down and ignore it. But obviously the body still is going to communicate to you and will continue to show up until you take the time to address it. And you don't want it to be too late. So obviously building that sense of mindfulness is really important. And how you can do that is just checking in with yourself every single day. And through, today's fast-paced lifestyle, just taking a few minutes to check in with yourself and take that time to slow down, waking up every morning and just having that mindful thought of, how am I feeling today? Like when I woke up, like, did I have a decent sleep? Did I meet all my needs, or did I overlook something? And just taking time is really, really important. Another thing is obviously you have the power of your breath and you can take time to slow down and use your parasympathetic nervous system. So we have two aspects of our nervous system. We have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. The sympathetic nervous system is designed to activate trauma responses, which are in turn stress responses. And so that's that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And those are designed to keep us alive, and they're very, very important. But oftentimes we get trapped and stuck in those trauma responses, stress responses, because our body, doesn't know that it's safe. And we need to tell our body that we are safe. So if you're having pains, again, just start with that mindfulness of okay, my knee is really hurting. Is there some inflammation? Obviously, is there something going on physically there? Or am I really stressed and I need to take time to nurture myself, do different healing practices with the body, lymphatic drainage, stretching, yoga. And obviously the mind and the body are connected. So I always tell people your thoughts create your feelings create your reality. So if you're having positive thoughts, you're going to feel better in your body. And then in turn, you're going to create a different positive reality for yourself. So obviously you can use that to your advantage if you're having pain in your body as well, by saying my body operates in its highest, best form. My body loves me. I love my body. And, try to talk to your body and work with your body even in that way.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's a lot of information.
No, it's good though. It's good. That's what we're here for.
No, I feel like I've gotten a lot of this information from different sources,
yeah,
but
totally.
This is nice to get it in a kind of Spark Notes kind of.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
That's explaining it in that way.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned, can you touch a little bit more on what somatic healing means?
Yeah.
Because I know it has to do with like the nervous system, but like, can you touch a little bit more deep into like, because some people might be wondering what that is.
Absolutely. So when you say psyche, that means the brain. When you say soma, it means the body. So soma really just means body. So somatic healing is really using your body as a tool and activating the tools we have within us to help us regulate our nervous system, to feel better in our body. So somatic healing, there's a lot of different practices out there. I mean, on social media, you've probably seen people screaming, crying, breathing, stretching their muscles. People, like some body workers are even trained to like work with the fascia and the muscles and like push down deep. And like you'll see people activated and crying. And that's because release is happening with the body. So the way that I am trained and how I like to weave in somatic healing into my practices is EFT tapping, which is using the acupressure points on the body to help regulate the nervous system and stimulate new patterns within the nervous system. Breathing, which is just like absolutely incredible. Even if you just sit here right now and take a deep breath, it just like feels so good.
Remember when we used to do that?
Before every episode.
We used to take a deep breath before every single episode of the podcast.
I love that.
We should bring that back.
Yeah,
Sounds like we should
definitely. Yeah, it just feels so good, And then like there's different breathing exercises that you can do that are very intentional so that the breath is actually activating emotional release and then also nervous system regulation. I even say like stretching is really, really helpful and healthy for somatic healing. Walking and like being active in your body is like really, really great too. So there's so many different ways, but it's just putting more of that focus on your body when you're healing.
Our issues are in our tissues.
That's it. Exactly. I mean, it's so crazy. Like, I remember I was doing a breathwork session one day and I was doing different variations of breath where like you're putting more intention in your stomach than your and then your diaphragm and then pushing out through your mouth. And I just remember some emotion was coming up. And I was like, what is this? Like I was so shocked that actually your breath could help you to release emotion. But if you think about it again, 90% of us live in survival mode where we're holding our breath all the time, or we're clenching our fists or our muscles are tight. And like, if you ever go to a massage and the masseuse is like, oh, your muscles are really tight. It's like because the stress that you're taking in and you're holding on to and within your muscles and your organs and everything is like you're holding on to that so tight. When our stress responses are activated, our breathing is affected, our organs are affected, like literally designed again to protect us. If you're being chased by a bear or a lion or whatever, or like a threat, somewhat your body is then going to help you. It's going like hormonally, your physique is going to improve so that you can run away, or that your breathing is going to slow down so that you can easily run, things like that. Your digestion stops. So a lot of people have a lot of trauma in their gut because, or like, traumatic experiences with their health in their gut because our digestive system is affected by chronic stress. So again, like if you are mentally initiating some sort of guidance to your body to help your body regulate, your gut will improve. So
Yeah.
It's all connected, right?
it is. Exactly.
I'm curious to ask you, I've been in therapy for a long time now, so I'm curious to ask you, how long have you been a therapist for?
So I've been a therapist for almost 10 years.
10 years? Okay. So what do you find that like people are struggling with nowadays that really wasn't a thing when you started doing this? Like, what do you see popping up this far?
That's a great
question.
question.
Because I imagine like a lot has changed over the last 10 years, especially like in terms of how we look at mental health. And
absolutely. That's an incredible question. I mean, June is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. Like I think that's amazing that you guys are bringing awareness to even just mental health on your podcast. I'm very passionate about that because I've worked with a lot of men who have been afraid to seek out that mental health support. So I would say right off the bat, diving into that, like I've worked with a lot of people who identify as male and they, are just feeling like they can't open up and be vulnerable, or they've avoided therapy for a really long time because of the stigma that is presented on them. They do not feel safe to open up and be vulnerable and even say like, I need help. So I definitely have seen more male clients, seeking out therapy and even speaking about it, or showing up on social media and feeling safer to be in their vulnerability and their power. There's a lot of male leaders out there who are, feeling more comfortable being in their power on social media and saying like, I'm dealing with this, I'm struggling, and I can help you. So I think that's really great. But, in my own practice, I've definitely seen that. Obviously, right now, currently, there's a lot of people who are fearful of like what's going on in the world and everything. So like I'm supporting a lot of people who are very much emotionally dysregulated and in fear states around like the economy, the political, situation going on and everything like that. So there's a lot of stuff there. I think also finances. I see a lot of finances. People who are just struggling financially, which of course, I am a self-paid therapist where it's like I don't take insurance. And so I always feel guilty. I'm like, yeah, we're processing your emotions right now around your finances and you have to pay me after this. And so it's really difficult. But I would say that, a lot of people are struggling and feeling so many things come up around the finance issue, whether it's like an identity issue, like, oh, I feel like a failure, or I don't know what to do with my life, or how can I get by and provide for myself and my family? So there's a lot of stress there. And then I would say the most common thing that I see in my clients, and again, all ages, genders, just different circumstances, different interest values, like everyone struggles with this, is like self-esteem. Believe it or not, I always share that fact that as a therapist, I have not had one client, I've worked with people who have like a ton of money, like millionaires, like people, or very established in their career, like you could say like judges, lawyers, business owners, things like that. Like I've worked with, people who you would put a stigma on of like, oh, they're fine, they're happy, whatever, or they must be confident because they have $1 million. No. People come to me and like they question themselves constantly. They have trauma, they've had stressful experiences in their life where they're questioning themselves, they don't have confidence, which then leads to diagnoses of anxiety, depression, PTSD, a lot of clients who struggle with OCD. So there's a lot going on in people's lives that, they're processing with me.
Mm-hmm. Where do you find that most people, trauma can happen to anybody at any time, but do you feel like that the majority of people have stuff that lingers from childhood and just continues to grow on?
Definitely. And what's interesting is that there's obviously like big T trauma, they call it, where there's like, very traumatic experiences where it's like, oh, there was some sort of abuse that happened, neglect, even like a physical accident, like a car accident, or, any type of loss or anything like that. And then there's like the small T, which is, you had a bad fight or a friendship breakup or something like that. And it caused, or even like, bullying could go either way, It doesn't, when we think of like childhood trauma, I think there's like a stigma on there of like you were neglected by your parents or abused in some way, like sexually, physically, emotionally, psychologically, which, is horrible saying that a lot of us have. But even just like experiences like bullying or friendship stuff, loneliness, job stuff even, or parents who maybe like they tried their best and like there wasn't like a lot of big trauma that happened like with abuse or neglect, but like personalities of your parents where as you're kind of growing up. And I'll give you an example. I was working with a man in his 60s and he was like experiencing some anxiety and some OCD symptoms, and he was seeking out therapy because it was disrupting his life. And he was like, I need to see someone for help. And then as we dove deeper into the problem, because I'm the type of therapist that I am like, let's get to the root, let's dive deeper. We can manage your symptoms all day, but like what's causing your suffering right now? And so as we kind of dove deeper, and he was talking more about his family dynamics and his parents, we realized more that a lot of his issues that he was having, especially in relationships, was because of his mother's personality and the way that she treated him growing up. But, especially at that age, you were taught that to respect your parents and to think that like your parents are right and that you can't have feelings of your own. As we're generationally healing, that's not the case. Like we're learning to be better for the next generation, that every feeling that we have as humans are valid. And so now the next generation is going to be more intentional with like experiencing emotion and saying to your parents, like, you hurt my feelings. But, previously in, older generations, that wasn't the case. It's just how they grew up, and we're evolving. So he, being in his 60s and kind of growing up in that generation was like, wow, for the first time, I'm experiencing emotion that I should have had. Well, I had, but I stuffed down, and I can't tell my mom how I feel right now. But he was processing it in therapy.
Yeah, I would imagine that like every day is kind of like a new day for you, because it's like different people are facing new problems. As someone who, when I first went to therapy, like being in bad relationships is what brought me there. What's your kind of take on how people are experiencing relationships today, and like what's what are people struggling with?
And I love that you asked me that question, because I also do couples therapy, and it's like one of my favorite things to do, because I think that you can really challenge each other in couples therapy, but even within yourself too. So relationships definitely are really difficult, and it's definitely something that you have to be very intentional with going into it. And I think the more mindful and intentional you are with your own self and your healing and your emotions and your behaviors, the better your relationship can be. But I think it's all about communication and understanding. I find that a lot of people struggle with defense mechanisms in their communication. We are a product of our environment and our, growing up and things like that. So again, that subconscious programming that we are who we are because of how we grew up, and then how intentional we are in recovering and healing and growing and evolving as humans. And some people they grew up where all they saw was fighting in their family. And so they don't really know any different. And some people are intentional with evolving in that, and some people aren't, And if they want to salvage their relationship, they will be receptive to me or their partner saying, the way that you're communicating is not healthy. And then that way they can learn new skills and help the relationship and help themselves. But the one thing that I notice that everyone does, and this is just like, I think a human instinct, is when you say, I feel this, or when you did this, I felt this way, or this affected me in this way, the other partner is usually very defensive, and I'm like, well, you did this to me, And so I really like to help people work through that by practicing this technique that I call like the validation formula. And it works in all types of relationships. It doesn't have to be romantic. It could be friendship, work, whatever. If you say something like, you validate the person, in the sense of like, I understand that you are very stressed out at work, and I can hold space for you while you're stressed. And you made me feel frustrated and upset when you lashed out at me because of your stress. That is so much more well received to the human, I feel like, to the human spirit and emotions than, you know, any other type of communication. But we, you know, a lot of the times we're emotional beings and energetic beings, and we kind of let that lead the way instead of like, you know, our mind. So I see a lot of like defense mechanisms in relationships, as well as, you know, just bringing our stuff into relationships, you know, like healing isn't linear and we're always navigating things. We're always going through things. And I actually read this quote one time that I loved, and it was like, intimate relationships are meant to help you heal. Like we're meant to be connected to other humans, and because we trigger each other, you know? And so if you can understand that, like, you can trigger each other, but still allow love to be there. You don't have to be hurtful or malicious, and it's just how you learn and evolve with each other as a couple. Then you can, you know, make it work, obviously, until you realize if you're meant to be with this person or you're not meant to be with this person, you know? So.
You also are a parent. So how do you see parents handling raising kids nowadays, going through therapy? Are they open to that? Is that something that you see a lot more often now?
So my last name is Parent, which is interesting, but actually I don't have any kids.
You don't?
No, but
I thought you
no,
were.
it's okay.
No, sorry.
You know, I get that a lot because
you post a lot of kids.
I do.
Now. That's what
so
I assumed. Sorry.
No, please listen. Thank you, because that is a mirror from the universe. I am manifesting being a mother very soon in my life. But no, they're my niece and nephew. So they're my sister's kids, which, I mean, me and my sister are best friends. We're very, very close. She is like my person. We grew up together. We had a traumatic childhood together. We're like, so for me, like, I am her village. So that question still applies to me in that sense. I can kind of navigate that in the best way. You know, so I'm helping her to be that supportive, like, person to her in her life. So ask me it again.
Let's reframe it a little bit. How do you see parents navigating taking their kids through the process of going to therapy and trying to work on their issues?
Like as a couple?
Yeah.
So,
because I gotta
or
assume
maybe not as a couple. Yes.
Yeah. Either way, but I assume, like, because there could be couples where it's just like the guy is like, I don't want to send my son to therapy, and the wife is just like, he should go. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I've definitely navigated that a lot as well. So the first half of my career actually was a child and family therapist. So that's how I got a lot of my experience. And you know, again, that it really does speak to like that mindfulness and awareness of who you are as a person. And I am the kind of person and therapist where I will lovingly and gently nudge someone in the right direction, but I am a full believer in like meeting people where they are. Like, you can't force someone to be ready for something that they're not. All I can do is like educate someone on the benefits, or you know, be that beacon of light for someone, in that sense of like, this is the way to help you as a family, or help your child, or help you in, you know, in any way. But actually, like, it's one of the reasons why I stopped doing therapy with children, because, and it was very hard for me because I love children and I wanted to be that support to them, but not everyone is as intentional as us, or like in that space where they're ready for healing. So I did see a lot of resistance to not really like their child getting therapy as much. Like, I do find that people are open to it, especially if there's like children, again, they don't have like that cognitive development to say, I am depressed. I am feeling sad. They have to learn that with their parents or other professionals. But they will act out in like frustration and anger, and in ways that to us as adults who are cognitively developed, like, it looks like quote unquote negative behavior. But, you know, behaviors are indicators of something deeper emotionally going on with children. So a lot of times I found that like parents would, you know, send their kids to therapy with kind of like uneducated and intentions of like, just fix my child, you know, fix their behaviors. And then we would work on a lot of things, and then they would go home, and then the problem was actually maybe like the dynamics at home or the energy at home, the environment. And so like it was almost like sending the child back into an environment that was just constantly triggering them. And that's just like one example. But, some people are still very much like in that stigma. Like, I wanted to go to therapy as a child. And I remember like my mom saying to me, like they weren't really going to send me to therapy because it was more so like when I was a teenager. I saw a therapist when my mom and my dad got divorced. But then when I was a teenager and she was with my stepdad, I wanted to go to therapy, but they were too focused on like how they would look. So it was like, no, don't go to therapy. And that was just an example of like how a lot of people do think, like they think that like, oh, my child is going to go to therapy and talk badly about me or something like that, and a lot of parents are fearful of like what's going to happen if their child is vulnerable and opens up. So I do find that is a barrier sometimes as well.
What do you think are some signs of your child maybe needing therapy? Because like you said, they don't know how to process some things. So sometimes it could be somatic for them. Like if your kid has like a stomach ache all the time, like that might mean something way deeper than them actually. They just don't know how to process it.
That is exactly right. So like that is one of the telltale signs, like headaches, not sleeping or sleeping too much, stomach aches, having trouble breathing. The child might say like my chest hurts, and they might be having some like rapid heartbeats that might be like anxiety. Pictures, children are very honest in certain ways. Like they want to express themselves, and so they'll express themselves in play or in graphics. So they'll, drawing, or they'll be playing, even if they're playing with another child or you, and they might say something while they're playing that just indicates something deeper. That's why like I'm a huge advocate of play therapy with children, especially the younger ones, because you could be playing. It doesn't have to be like, that the stigma of play therapy when you have like Barbies and you're like, trying to act out scenarios. It doesn't even have to be that. I used to kick around the soccer ball with, kids, and we would be like, playing a game, and we would get competitive, and we would like be really in the thick of the game. And then all of a sudden, like, I would just throw in there like, how was your day today? Or like, what'd you do last night, or something like that. And then it just opens them up, and then they start talking, So you could be even doing something like that the child enjoys and not like forcing them into talking, and they might open up naturally. And trust building with kids is like the most important thing. They want to be able to feel safe around you, especially if they, don't feel safe at school, or if they don't feel safe around like your parents and they're talking to, their friends or their family members, things like that. So. Yeah.
You said the big word that seems to pop up for a lot of people in therapy, which is divorce.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, I come from,
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I'm curious what, because I think that I had this assumption that was like people who are therapists, or anybody who works like in the field of like helping other people, they have it all figured out and they've conquered all their demons and stuff like that. Do you want to dive in a little bit deep into like how you worked your way through that, and then how you managed to like make a personal connection with people who maybe are going through something that you've also gone through? It doesn't necessarily have to be that, but.
No, absolutely. Yeah. I love being vulnerable and sharing my story, or just even just like, nice. Talking about my healing journey is so important. I mean, I think it's all about how you navigate divorce and all of that stuff, like as parents. And my story is because my trauma and my experience, my negative experience, I should say, is largely because my parents did not handle their divorce in the best way for me and my sister. So my parents, they were young, and my parents are great people, and I'm very, I have a platform on social media, and my parents follow me. So, I wrote a book, my parents follow me. Yeah. I'm very intentional also with being very like, I'm never going to like bash my parents or talk about things that, even though I am hurting or have hurt or have gone through a lot, the one thing I always will say is that like, I am operating in my integrity. That's my value. Like, I just like, I'm not going to sit there and say something or do anything that would like hurt my parents in any way. But I am very vocal and vulnerable about things. But anyway, so my parents were young. They were like in their like 21 years old when they had me, 21, 23, whatever, when they had me. And if we think back to like who we were when we were that age, like, yeah, like,
yeah.
I would not have been the best mother or ready to be like a mother myself, or like any partner that I was with at that time. Like, oh my God, right?
Yeah,
so like,
we can laugh about it now.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Totally. Yeah.
So I try to like give them, but like that's like the 34-year-old Katie kind of giving that grace. Like the 4-year-old, 5-year-old Katie like deserved better, obviously. So like what I went through was like just a lot of chaotic, stressful turmoil. There was alcoholism, abuse, all of that. And then the divorce was just so toxic and unhealthy, talking badly about each other, moving away. My mom moved us away from my dad, remarried into a very unhealthy relationship, remarried a narcissistic, abusive person. And then, me and my sister basically lived in survival mode for 20 plus years. And just the dynamics of like not growing up with both of your parents, and then both of them being kind of like immature and unhealthy. And like, it just was a lot for children to deal with. I never had a safe space at home to like be a child or be myself. I had to like be on guard and walk on eggshells in both homes, whether it was like abusive or chaotic emotionally because of alcoholism. Like, there just like was so much going on. And then when I grew up, I got as quickly out of my house as fast as I could, and I went to college and did everything, and I've been on my own since I was like like a teenager. And so that in itself has caused a lot of survival mode and stress for me in that way. So I am actively healing, and that's a huge part of my brand, is that I will show up. And of course, like, I want to be the most professional, I look up to those women who show up and they have their hair and makeup done every day. They have like professional clothing on. They're running this like awesome brand. But I'm also like, every day sometimes feels hard for me because I'm still working through feeling exhausted because of depression, anxiety, PTSD, working hard to like provide for myself. And so I've had to also like accept like, this is me and this is who I am right now, and I'm evolving into the best version of myself. And I find that people love it though. Like, people have like said to me like, thank you for saying that. Thank you for showing up like that. Thank you for being you. Because also, like, who wants to always watch the perfect person on social media? I'll show up and I'll haven't brushed my hair, and I'll be like, hey guys, like, I'm going for a walk today, or I'm, I did this today, or I'm really burnt out, so I haven't been on social media in a few days because I'm just burnt out and I'm tired. And people, I find that really engages people. And that's not my goal always, is always social media engagement, but it's just community engagement of like, it's validation, like, hey, like, we see you, So I feel like even as I'm doing my own healing work and all of that, like, people have really like taken to that, and they're joining me in that, and they like that. So I like that.
Yeah, I think it's great. Yeah. I think it's awesome, because I think one of the barriers into opening up like that could be that like you're putting that person on like a pedestal,
exactly,
or something like that is just like, oh, they figured it all out and now they're gonna tell me how to do it, when realistically, like, it's the same thing kind of with your parents, which is that like, you got to remember that whether they were 21 or they were 32 or they were 40, they were still learning how to be people.
Exactly.
Like, I thought when I was 32 I'd have everything figured out, but then like, no, you're not. Like,
exactly.
So, I think that's a great way to go about like being a therapist. Like, my therapist personally like sometimes shares like, like, I had a hard time getting to the gym today. Even just little details like that can help you be like, oh, like, so you haven't just like your brain isn't like a perfect linear path where everything goes easily and you know how to navigate every situation.
Exactly. I think like humans want to be validated in their experience. They don't want perfection, you know. There's no perfection doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So, you know.
You're telling me, huh? I think one of the things, and I think it's a super popular thing that's starting to get like the attention that it should now, is that like a lot of people struggle with shame. Divorce is a big one, but it could be in a lot of different ways. How do you navigate that with your clients? Because people have it around all sorts of things like addiction, intimacy, relationships, whatever, even just like the basic element of showing up as yourself with self-esteem. People feel shameful about themselves. How does that, what's your personal and professional take on that?
Absolutely. And, you know, to follow up from the question that you guys asked before of like one thing I see in every client or what I see often is shame. And that's that like low self-esteem, low confidence, that questioning of self. Like people do hold on to shame. And I think that's like a subconscious wired defense mechanism that we have. It's like if we beat ourselves up and if we like hold on to that emotion, then it protects us in some way, or it like where it's like this attempt to get better. It's like almost like we beat ourselves up, it's going to like punish us or like help us grow in some way. So it's about rewriting that narrative within yourself of like, and again, it comes back to like my foolproof thing is validation. You know, we do not validate ourselves enough. And that is something that I have done so much on my healing journey, and I drill into my clients, is that inner dialogue, that narrative, it has to be filled with self-validation. Like even if you made a mistake, even if you did something that you're inherently not proud of or it wasn't your best, validate yourself. And then, and again, follow it up with and I can do better. So a statement, so something that, you know, this is like a therapy term, is dialectical behavioral therapy. It's all about the dialectics, which is like two things can be true at once. So one of the statements that they have that teaches people how to use DBT is, I am doing the best that I can and I can do better. So two things can coexist within yourself. And so if you know that you can say that to yourself every single day, I'm doing the best that I can and I can do better. It releases that shame. It helps to accept where you are, and it helps to validate yourself. Like you do not have to punish yourself every single day, you know, to get better or just be a human. Like we can speak kindness to ourselves.
When you talk about changing the narrative inside, like the inner dialogue, what are some of the ways that you like to teach your clients to go about that? Like for me, affirmations is a big one. Like I did a lot of like just journaling out the same things over and over again, day after day at the beginning to like really start to rewire that process and like get it going.
Yeah. And first I want to take this opportunity to validate you because, and you've inspired me as well. You posted something, this was weeks ago, on your story. And I should have said this to you right away, but I'm glad I'm having the opportunity to tell you now. You said something on your story about like your recovery journey with addiction and things like that. And it was involving shame. It was something like, I look back at like all the healing work that you did now and who you are now, this version of yourself that you are to this day. You look back and you say like, oh, I wish I knew all those things back then, or I wish I didn't wait. I think you said specifically, I wish I didn't. Waiting. Yes, yeah, I wish I didn't wait too long to like heal or get better, things like that. And you inspire me too, because I was a runner in middle school and high school, and I was always this active person, and I see you like really dedicating yourself to like that practice and healing and really like being your best self. And I want to say like that is amazing.
Thank you.
And your energy does inspire people, because it did inspire me for sure.
Thank you.
Because I'm on a journey where I'm trying to find myself again and, you know, lose weight and just like feel my best. And like you don't even realize the impact you're having. Like people just like click, 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 but actually it's like that energy really translates, you know? So I want to commend you on that.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much.
But yeah, so again, it's like that filter of mind, body, reality. So your thoughts create your feelings. So a lot of people say like your body leads the way, like your body first. And yes, that's true in certain instances, but the brain is like very powerful. It dictates your whole body. You know, all the neurons and everything and the functions of the brain like manage the body. So you can enter into your body and change your experience in your life by the thoughts that you're having. And so people like, you know, will always say, like, oh, affirmations don't work for me. You know, they'll say that typical spiel. And I'm like, you know.
I never said that. I've never said that. I said they weren't my thing.
But it's because, you know, it's the cycle of thoughts create feelings, feelings create my reality. If you really allow the affirmation, which in turn is just a thought, to really create an emotional experience for you, and you do it enough, you know, then it rewires your subconscious, and your subconscious is taking on another belief. So the reason why it might not work for you or even other people is because maybe that thought is creating discomfort in your body. Your body is rejecting that thought because it's not used to that thought. And so you have to challenge yourself, and you have to continue. Consistency leads to change in your life, and it's the cycle of the mind-body connection.
All right, I'll go get my notebook right now.
Absolutely.
All right, fine.
And one thing that I specifically do with clients is like I can spit affirmations at you all day. I can say, you know, say that you're enough, say that you're beautiful, say that you're strong, like, right? Like your typical, I am worthy, your typical affirmations. But what really, really helps is if you target the wounds that you specifically have. And so when I wrote my book, I wrote specific affirmations that were very unique, that really targeted the common symptoms that I feel like people suffer with when they're recovering with their mental health or trauma. You know, so like one affirmation that I wrote in there was like, I release shame with every kind and validating word I speak to myself, you know, something very unique. And so you can create your own affirmations, thoughts, by really tapping into like, what do you need specifically? So I definitely struggle with my self-worth. So saying I am worthy, yes, of course, that's going to support me because I want to own the fact that inherently, yeah, I am worthy and I need to work on believing that, right? But if your brain and your body are resisting that thought and you're having a really hard time like shifting your reality by just saying I am worthy, then you start with different thoughts. Like, I am learning to love myself. I'm learning to feel worthy every day. That feels good to my body. That feels good to my mind. And then I can have a positive emotional experience with that. And then that will create sustainable, positive change for you.
Yeah, I think that's important because like you can tell somebody like, just that you're worried about money, like say I am abundant over and over again. You're gonna feel like an asshole. You're just gonna be like,
where is my money, universe?
Well, yeah, I think too. It's as someone who struggles with this, and I think a lot of people do. It's if you are kind of like consistently in battles with your own thoughts, like where you're always trying to like push down the negative stuff, and you're trying not to believe that stuff, and you don't want to do that. It can then be very easy when you go and try to affirm something that you're trying to believe is true to also like have that feeling about it to like, well, that's also not true either. You know what I mean? But it's kind of like what you were saying in terms of like two things being true at once.
Yeah, exactly. And like all your mind and your body has known for all of these years is shame and negative thoughts and guilt and like negative inner dialogue. So you have to give yourself time and space to actually like overcome that and rewire your brain, you know? So
I think also too, like talking about the differences in genders, that it's like as men, we're very like fact driven and like
Yeah.
logical and like evidence based. So it could be hard to be like, oh, I love myself, I treat myself well.
Yeah.
And then you look back at the evidence of addiction or whatever it might
Yeah.
be in your
Yeah.
past, where it was just like, how do I love myself if I was out doing things
Right.
that were horrible for me
Yeah.
on a daily basis that I never really got over.
Absolutely, exactly. And then that's where the validation piece comes in, you know, like you can say a million different things to make yourself feel better in that moment of like, I only knew what I knew back then, or, you know, I had a partner, I was with someone in 2019 and he passed away from addiction. And, you know, I remember when I was seeking support out from like, you know, my people in my life, I had a supervisor at the time. And she had a son who struggled with addiction too. So like we really, you know, connected. And she said to me, she's like, you know, drugs work, Katie. Like drugs work. And it's like, you're right. Actually, like if you break it down, it's like, and it doesn't have to be drugs. I mean, you know, food, gambling, sex, or relationships, or even negative thinking is an addiction. You know, people don't even realize that. Yeah. You know, like anything in excess where you're seeking out, they're called in therapy, they're called maladaptive behaviors. We are trying to get our needs met, you know, and like people who are drinking or doing drugs or anything they're seeking out getting their needs met emotionally, or they're doing something that their mind and their body is getting addicted to because it's working for them in some capacity. So, you know, it's all about creating healthier coping skills for yourself. But, you know, like there's so many factors. We could do a whole podcast on addiction in itself, but like there's so many factors to like why and how people, you know, become addicted or become, they're seeking support somewhere that is unhealthy for them inherently, you know?
Yeah. I think all of us have some type of addiction, right?
Absolutely.
Right?
I mean, yeah. Or, you know.
But also I think that there's kind of like a struggle, and maybe you experience this in therapy, where it's like the addiction to negative thinking on paper just doesn't seem serious when like you see other people out there who like have gone through these huge traumatic experiences, or they're addicted to heroin or whatever it might be. And then you invalidate yourself by being like, oh, that's not as serious. Like, what do I need to go to therapy for? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that comes from, which is definitely something I wanted to bring up to you, which is black and white thinking.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Which is like, you kind of already brought it up though, which is like that two things can be true at once.
Yes.
And I think that there's like these black and white things that we put up, and then there's reality that's in the middle. And we don't give ourselves like to be well-rounded people, or to have things be, I guess, like
you're struggling.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's like we don't know any different. And a lot of times when I tell people like, just validate yourself, they're like, what? Wow, you're right. Like they're almost like shocked that I gave them permission to like validate themselves, you know? And we're, you know, anyone who's struggling with black and white thinking or negative thoughts, like you're not alone. I think we all struggle in that way. And if we talk about like the addiction to the negative thoughts, I mean, we'll just bring up depression. You know, it's really like the depression, you know, people that, again, like that cycle of my thoughts create my feelings. And when people struggle with depressive episodes, or they have depression, you know, they are not talking positively to themselves. And it feels, I always call it like that stuck in the mud feeling, where you just feel like you can't get out, but it's like this emotional thing. So of course you compare and invalidate yourself by saying, well, someone else has it worse.
Yeah, I went through it. I went through a divorce, but somebody didn't have parents. It's whatever you want.
Yeah. And, you know, your experience is valid no matter what.
Yeah. You can go down that road a million times. There's always somebody who has it better than you, and then there's always somebody who has it a million times worse too.
Yeah. And then like if I was sitting with someone who was struggling with that, like I would help them go deeper into...
You are, but...
Yeah, I was going to say that. But I would say like, you know, let's go deeper. Like what is really driving the invalidation there? Do you struggle with self-love? Because if you don't love yourself, maybe you're not, giving yourself permission to validate yourself or have the human experience or have those emotions, And then going even deeper, you can say, like, what narrative is that? Is that society telling you that you can't validate yourself, or that, maybe you didn't love yourself because, like, again, if it's like that, the childhood stuff, like, was there any bullying involved where you took on that perception and identity that you're not lovable? Or did your parents invalidate your feelings enough to where then you said you took on that belief that my feelings aren't valid? So everything can kind of like go deeper into things, and then that's how you heal at the roots. And that's why I called my book Safety at the Roots, because then you're establishing safety at the root of who you are.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good way of putting it.
Yeah.
That help? Yeah, sure. That was great. Of course. Yeah. So yeah, let me meditate on that. You go ahead.
Yeah.
So, like, as somebody who's very comfortable and forward in approaching mental health and being somebody who, like, wants other people to lift themselves up and make that change for themselves, how do you, because you, like you said before, you can't push anybody. Everybody's ready on their own terms, and I fully believe that. But, like, what are some signs when you see somebody who you can tell is, like, almost there? Like, what are some things that you'll give them as advice?
So I think, like, any sort of, like, empowerment of, like, starting small and, getting, if I were to personally know someone, then I would get to know them and, like, what works for them. Some people are resistant to, like, the therapy. So for instance, like my sister, she definitely is acknowledging that there's some, like, anxiety or PTSD going on, and she's not quite ready for therapy. But, I've encouraged her to, like, make sure that she's eating healthy, make sure that, she's opening up and talking to me or her husband or, like, anyone she feels comfortable with. She needs to get out there and go for a walk, journaling her feelings. I bought her a journal, so, like, it's all about starting small and trying to release the resistance in areas that you feel the most comfortable with. So the reason why I push journaling so much for people, especially if they're not ready for, psychotherapy sessions with a therapist, is that it's taking the internal and bringing it external. Mm-hmm. And some people get very, like, nervous around journaling because, like, I don't know how to do it. It's like, there is no right way to journal. Sometimes I bullet things in my journal, or sometimes I write in, like I, feel this way, or sometimes I'll journal, like, in third person, like, Katie, went through this or whatever. Like, there's no right way. It's just about processing the emotions and just guiding people to release any type of emotion in a healthy way that feels comfortable for them. So starting small is important.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. And, like, all of these things are great, like things like, journaling, whether it's meditation or whatever it is, to help you kind of, like, get to know yourself better. What's something that maybe you do personally or that you recommend your clients that isn't necessarily, like, a mainstream thing that you feel like you've seen has helped a lot of people?
Well, so we could talk about Reiki. Okay. So,
awesome.
because, like, I'm thinking here, like, I always tell people to make sure they eat breakfast and they're, walking, getting outside, prioritizing themselves in those ways. But those are very, like, mainstream things. And just, even those, a lot of people don't eat breakfast, actually. Like,
I had an oatmeal cream pie on the way in.
That's right.
Right. I ate breakfast today.
I actually ate breakfast today. So I'm very proud of myself. I'm trying.
Yeah. I validate you eating breakfast.
Thank you.
Gotcha.
You're learning and I love it. But actually, so Reiki, energy healing. So Reiki is a energy healing technique. It's a Japanese technique that many, many people now have taken on as a practice. And it is, like, next level healing to me. And it is by far one of the most beneficial practices that I've ever done for myself and my clients. And just to put it simply, energy healing comes from a higher source. But in a Reiki session, you are practicing mindfulness, breath work, being very intentional with your time and reducing stress. And so the hands-on healing and the energy work is coming in, and it has its own intelligence and it's doing its own thing for you. And it's bringing up things, and like oftentimes I'll put my hand on someone's stomach and it'll start to gurgle, and it just means that it's moving the energy around. And we are energetic beings, and we have energetic points in our body, like you could say the chakra system, but we actually have like many, many more energy centers in our body than the chakra system itself. That's just like the main one that goes through the center of our bodies. And we are energy, and so we have to work with our energy. Everything is energy, and emotions are energy in motion. So a lot of times that stuck, trapped emotion that lives in our body in physical ways, that's affecting our body physically, is also that energy that's stuck. So Reiki really helps to bring up that energy and out of your body. And so a lot of times, which I promote and I love, is like people really cry during Reiki sessions and they're releasing, and that's so important. And it's because the body is designed to heal, like I said before, but our nervous system, when we are in our day-to-day and we're active, and even most of the time if we're actively living in survival mode or in our sympathetic nervous system state, our body is going to stay stuck and not release. So when you're doing Reiki and you're on my Reiki table, I'm helping your nervous system enter the parasympathetic state so that you can meditate, you can be vulnerable, and you can emotionally and energetically release. And so, it is becoming more mainstream. Like it is, it is becoming more of a confident healing practice, even in the medical system. I've worked with a lot of people who are coming out of like the oncology centers, like if they're getting cancer treatment, and they were like, they found me because they got Reiki in the hospital going through chemo, and they wanted to continue when they came home from the hospital.
Wow.
Or like they had surgery and they received Reiki. So I love when I hear that, because I'm like, even the hospitals are now like hiring Reiki practitioners to come in. And, I've worked with clients who maybe come in once and they're like, I love it. It was great. But like, you have to work it into your budget or whatever. And I've also had clients come in and see me every other week or weekly or monthly. Like I always tell people, like, if you go for a monthly massage, same thing for Reiki, you go and, you get your energy released and aligned and healed and all that. But it's important because it just helps you to release. And, what we talked about throughout this episode is like the importance of acknowledging your emotions and then releasing your emotions so that what you've been through doesn't continue to control your life.
Mm-hmm. I also think that some people struggle with like just asking for help in general, because it's like you wouldn't blink an eye to go get your taxes done by an accountant.
Right.
But then when something's going on with you emotionally or physically or something like that, you think like, I should be able to figure this out on my own. It's my body. Like, do you find
100%.
people struggle with that?
Absolutely.
It's like a pride thing almost. Like
it is.
Like this was given to me. Like, why can't I figure it out?
Yeah. I think it keeps people in that cycle of like staying stuck and not being able to really, take care of themselves. Even for me, just like a prime example is I'm starting to make more appointments for myself, like going to the chiropractor. I actually went to Desiree's chiropractor body worker yesterday, and I felt like 10 times better after I left. But that's been on my to-do list for 3 years, and doing all like the doctor's appointments, or, even me as a therapist, knowing the value of therapy. I put off going to therapy for a while because you just think like, yep, I got it, no problem. People have more of an endurance for emotional pain than they do physical. I say that lightly because like obviously it is a lot to suffer with emotional pain, but like if you had to put like pressure on a broken leg and walk through like a broken leg, you probably would not choose to do that rather than walking around with anxiety and depression every single day. But this is important to talk about because you don't have to. You don't have to walk around and suffer with your emotions or your mental health every single day. So it's just giving yourself permission to like let your guard down and do it. But I noticed even as a therapist, like even with like the last 6 months, with the fear of the economy and like just things like, you know, prices going up on all these other things, mental health services have dropped. Like I've lost a lot of work because, you know, people aren't prioritizing it as much.
It's the first thing that goes. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Which sucks, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, what else? You got something that
I'm curious to ask you about one of the things I struggle with personally. I think a lot of other people do is control.
Yeah.
Like we often like blame ourselves for, or even like you take a situation like a relationship and you tend to put all the blame on yourself because you only had control over your own actions. How do you approach with your clients when it's like, I'm feeling this because of how somebody else is making me feel, but I also like need to maintain control of myself and not let that kind of shake me, I guess.
I think just like where I would take that is like, I think safety within yourself and like vulnerability. I don't think, and this is a barrier in relationships, is that if you're specifically talking about like relationships, I think that we hold back our own emotions and even processing externally, like what's going on in our mind and our body, because we are afraid or we don't feel safe to express fully what's going on. So like, if you're having trouble or if someone's having trouble releasing control or blaming yourself or, you know, and you're having that, you're holding on to that internal dialogue and that feeling, it's because you're holding on to that, or maybe you don't feel safe in expressing that. And it doesn't always have to do with the other person. You know, you might feel safe and comfortable with that person or a partner, but it's more so your inability to express or you not feeling safe within yourself to express. Because again, you know, you can say like, I feel like it was my fault, or I feel like you know, I wanted to bring something to your attention, like I'm struggling because I feel XYZ, you know, and then that other person could most likely help you process that control or that lack of control that you feel.
Gotcha.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, totally. Well, it's a complicated question.
Yes, it is.
Like,
yeah, exactly. And, you know, there's a lot involved, but I think, yeah, like a lot of people like struggle with control. You know, they want to maintain that control, and it's really safety. You know, like I don't want my nervous system to feel dysregulated. I don't want to feel uncomfortable in my body having this conversation or expressing that emotion.
Okay, cool. So we're probably getting close to wrapping up here.
Yeah.
But I'm curious if there's like something, let's just say that there's somebody out there and they're not ready to go do therapy right now. What's like a small exercise or something? Maybe you can practice on one of us. That's like, this is something that you could do to kind of like deal with what you're going through right now.
I think even just simple breathing and just acknowledging. So like, even if you want me to do a little hands-on exercise now, I would say for the both of you to close your eyes. Okay. So if you want to close your eyes and just take a deep breath through your nose and out the mouth, and start to anchor yourself into your body and feeling safer being here and present in your body. And you could go ahead and put one of your hands over your heart and just feel your chest moving up and down as you take another big deep breath in through the nose and out the mouth. And just acknowledging that you're safe by speaking to yourself internally and saying, I am safe here in this moment. And it is safe for me to heal and want more for myself. Another big deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. And give yourself one last thing that you need, whether it's another validating statement or another big deep breath in. And when you're ready, you can open up your eyes. How did that feel?
That was nice. I was like using the comment.
Yeah, you really pulled out the meditation voice on us there.
Oh, I know. I know. Literally, everyone always
great,
says that.
But sometimes it is just that simple, you know.
It is, you know, and just like being with yourself and knowing that like you can ease whatever feeling that you have, whether it's a thought, a breath, or, you know, one resource that I love that I always tell people is water. Cold water on the face or your wrist, like washing your hands. If you have
we are in a heat wave right now.
Yeah, it's really, oh my God. But like if you're at work and you're like have your hair done, if you're, you know, female, have your makeup done, whatever, like, and you're, you know, you can't really splash your face, like even just like washing your face and your wrists, that cold temperature brings your nervous system down. So
Big fan of cold showers.
Yes. Yes.
But sometimes it is that simple, just like take a drink of water and take a deep breath.
Stay hydrated, eat breakfast. You know, it is so easy for your body to go into survival mode, even if you're, you know, you're mentally doing well. Even like if you're a mouth breather, if you're not eating breakfast, if you are always like on your phone or things like that, like immediately send your nervous system and we don't even realize it. So if like you're experiencing symptoms and you feel like, oh, I'm fine, but you have like a bout of anxiety, you know, there might be other reasons. So, you know, it's just about being more mindful with yourself.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on today and joining us. It was just super informative.
Yeah, this has been super helpful. Absolutely.
Yes, I'm so glad.
Before we go, if you want to just look at your camera, all the places to find you, all the things that you can do for people.
So my name is Katie Parent, and on Instagram, you can find me on Strengthen the Soul. It's one word, no other punctuation, strengthenthesoul.com. I also have a podcast called the Strengthen the Soul Podcast.
All right.
Awesome.
So thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah,
Thanks
so much,
guys.
Katie. We appreciate it.
Finally got it in.
Yay!
Finally got it done.
Our busy lives.
But I do want to have that other conversation about you said we could do a whole podcast about it.
Oh, addiction.
yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm happy to come back on for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks so much again.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.